The United Nations is to join forces with China over the use of its space station. Why has China been selected as the space host? The U.S., meanwhile, has disinvited China to participate at the 2018 Rim of the Pacific exercise. I'll be trying to find out exactly why. Welcome to this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Beijing. The United Nations is to dock with the Chinese space station. The ceremony for the announcement of UN-China cooperation on the utilization of the China space station was held on Monday in Vienna, Austria. The move follows a memorandum of understanding to work together to develop space capabilities of UN member states using China's future space station. The MOU was signed by the China Manned Space Agency, or the CMSA, and the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, or UNOOSA, in 2016. Now, completion of the China Space Station, or CSS, is expected by 2022 and will mark the third step in China's space program, which began in 1992. So why has China been selected as the space host, and how exactly will UN member states, especially developing countries, benefit from this initiative? I will be joined by Simonetta Pi Pippo, Director of UNOOSA from Vienna, Austria. But first, I'm joined by His Excellency Ambassador Shi Zhongjun, who is Ambassador and Permanent Representative of China to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Vienna, Austria. Ambassador Shi, welcome to the program. So I understand that there was a ceremony in Vienna yesterday. Explain to us the reason why China is cooperating with the United Nations in space flight.
Thank you. The United Nations is the most important multilateral platform. China attaches great importance to the role of the UN and the cooperation with it. The UN Office for Outer Space Affairs has been playing important roles in promoting space capacity building and international cooperation, and facilitating the achievement of 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. China conducts the CSS cooperation program together with UNOOSA with the objective of promoting its openness and inclusiveness and benefiting more countries.
Mm-hmm. So I understand that a memorandum of understanding was signed, and there is a call for proposals from around the world to be taken by the future China space station to the outer space as some kind of a scientific experiments or projects. How many entries have you received, and how will the international committees decide which proposals to be adopted?
Start from yesterday, after we announced this opportunity, then we will begin to select applications from different applicants. The selection committee will be composed of experts from both China and the UN. The selection of the applications will consider the expected contribution of the project to the applying countries. The criteria includes the scientific and technical value of the proposed project, implementation schemes, feasibility, safety review, compatibility review, meeting of conditions of the CSS, financial resources, and the flight mission plan, and etc.
I see. So what does China-UN space cooperation mean for UN member states? And I understand there is a special emphasis for making it available and accessible for developing countries that are UN members. Why is that, and what has been done, what will be done to facilitate that?
Space exploration is a driver and a tool for socio-economic sustainable development. With the global challenges we all face here on Earth, It is therefore important to foster collaboration and cooperation in the field of space activities. With this program, China is providing opportunities for all countries to share its space resources and promote international cooperation, space application, capacity building, and awareness raising in human space flight and space exploration. We believe such an effort may help achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. This time, we encourage the developing countries to participate in the cooperation on the utilization of China space station, including to do so in partnership with developed countries. In the selecting process, we will consider the importance of the expected contribution of the project to the applying countries. In terms of funding, selected experiments from governmental organizations or non-profit organizations may enjoy preferential treatment according to the situation. All these reflect China's support for developing countries.
So what kind of significance does this cooperation have for international space research? In other words, why does China want to do that?
And this cooperation is a concrete practice of building a new type of international relations and a shared future for humankind in space. It creates a new pattern and a new model for international cooperation in outer space, which utilizes China's space station to benefit more countries. The significance lies in three aspects specifically. First, the cooperation is highly open. It is for all countries, regardless of their level of development in outer space. Second, the cooperation is highly inclusive. Governments, international organizations, private entities, and research institutions, and other relevant organizations can all apply for its various cooperation models. Third, the cooperation is highly professional and transparent. China is cooperating with the UN, which is the most authoritative and universal organization. All applications will be jointly selected by experts from China and the UN, and the results of the cooperation will be submitted to both China and the UN.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Shi Zhongjun, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of China to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Vienna. Let me go to Ms. Simonetta Pi Pippo, who is Director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, or UN-USA. Ms. Pi Pippo, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, why has there been this international call for project proposals from UN member states using the future China space station? Why China?
First of all, we have to say that China is a spacefaring country, and the Chinese space program, since the launch of their first satellite in 1970, has been growing and growing in a lot of different fields in space activities. China is also an important member in the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which is our committee in the UN system. So, and by the way, the Office for Outer Space Affairs is also serving as the secretariat of the committee. So, China is also in the recent past, China has became, let's say, the first contributor in terms of voluntary contributions to the activities of the Office for Outer Space Affairs in different fields. And then it's also true that the Chinese government and through CMSA, so the China Manned Space Agency, they are developing this in-orbit laboratory, which will be available for experiments in microgravity conditions starting from the year 2022 and in low Earth orbit. And then considering all these elements and the very good collaboration that we are having with China in several fields, it was natural for us to even strengthen the collaboration with China and for China to strengthen the collaboration with UNUSA in the field of space exploration and human activities in space. And also you have to consider that the Office for Outer Space Affairs launched already in 2010, back in 2010, an important initiative called HSTI, which means Human Space Technology Initiative, under which this collaboration with China for the utilization of the China space station is falling. And it's also important to mention that China more recently is trying to open up its programs to the entire world. So we have also other discussions ongoing for scientific utilization of space missions from China. And so again, to answer your question, it was a natural strengthening, let's say, of our collaboration to go in the direction of having this memorandum of understanding and opening up the CSS, the China Space Station, to all the member states of the United Nations through this agreement with us. And the announcement of opportunity is the first step, the first concrete step for really improving also the international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space, in this case through CSS.
How much effort have the CMSA, which is China's manned space agency, and the UNUSA invested over the past years to realize the announcement for the solicitation of proposals from around the world?
It was a very let's say, interesting collaborative activity, because we had to prepare all the documents. It's the first time that the Chinese space station, the China space station, is open to others, and so we had to work on the handbook for the station, and we prepared the announcement of opportunity. We made joint studies and feasibility studies to understand which was the best way to involve developing countries, not only overall all the countries in the UN family. And so it's been 1 year of work together with our Chinese friends and colleagues, and the announcement of opportunity, as I said yesterday, has been the result of a long process, but also the first step of I hope, a longer collaboration.
So what activities, what next steps are expected after the announcement of the proposals? What are you expecting?
Yeah, what we've been doing, we've been informing all the permanent missions in Vienna and New York, and so that all the UN member states are now aware officially of this announcement of opportunity. We also published, obviously, this announcement of opportunity on the UNUSA website, and we will use all our channels and our network of experts to distribute the information all over the world so that everyone can benefit from this opportunity. What we are planning right now is a set of actions in terms of, waiting for the proposals, and then we have to start the selection process, which will be done in 2 steps. And so we expect to announce the winners more or less in 1 year from now.
How many winners, how many winning entries will be qualified, will be selected ultimately to go into outer space on board the China space station?
On purpose, we decided not to select a pre-cooked number. So what we want to see together, China, CMSA and UNUSA, we want to really stimulate the maximum number of proposals possible, and then we'll be selecting the best proposals in several fields. And so it will be a matching between the proposals we received and we receive and also the availability in terms of both launching availability and possibility for China to host these experiments on board the China space station. Not necessarily all the experiments will be launched together. It depends also on the time needed for each and every experiment to be developed and be ready for flying in microgravity conditions on CSS. So we'll be assessing the situation together with China in the next coming months after the first round for collecting the proposals is closed.
Right. And how will your team ensure that UN member states can have inclusive access to the space station, especially with developing countries, given probably more availability?
Yeah, clearly, as I mentioned, this announcement is open to all member states. But if you read the announcement, you see clearly that we have a preference for developing countries, because this is what we do at the Office for Outer Space Affairs. We try to bring, in every action we do, we try to bring the benefits of space activities to humankind. We try to bring the importance and the value of space to everyone, everywhere. So our approach is always on everything we do to be open and inclusive at the maximum extent possible. And at the very end, you have to consider that this is a capacity building activity. So if we have a developing country, a team from a developing country which needs to be supported, we will find internally and externally with our network of experts and together with China, we will find ways and means to support these new teams to become really good experts in order to be able to develop these experiments and be able to master space technologies.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to leave it there. Simonetta Pi Pippo, Director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs. And you have been watching The Point with me, Lu Xin. We'll take a short break, but when we come back, I'll be asking why the US decided to disinvite China to participate in the world's largest biennial international maritime exercises. Stay with us. China vowed to take every necessary measure to safeguard its sovereignty and security on Sunday after it warned off 2 U.S. warships, the U.S.'s Higgins and the U.S.'s Teton, that entered China's territorial waters off the Xisha Islands without China's approval. The challenge came just days after the U.S. disinvited China to participate in the 2018 Rim of the Pacific exercise, the world's largest international maritime exercise, known as RIMPAC. The drills are held every 2 years on and from the Hawaiian Islands in Southern California. In 2014, China participated for the first time, and in 2016, the then U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter invited China despite South China Sea tensions. So are the U.S. warships' intrusion and the disinvitation related? Under the larger context of China-U.S. trade negotiations and coordination on the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue, what signal is the Trump administration sending now? I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, and Einar Tangen, author, columnist, and commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So tell us, how serious was this intrusion by the 2 U.S. warships? Was it an innocent passage, like some might claim, or is it really an infringement on China's territorial integrity and sovereignty?
I think this is a very serious violation of China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Chinese government has strongly condemned such incursion into the Chinese territorial waters and lodged a protest, and the Chinese naval ships already took immediate action to record such incursion and also to escort them out of the Chinese territorial waters. And I think this kind of incursion is not unprecedented. It has been happening again and again, and especially under President Donald Trump's presidency, this is intensifying in intensity as well as the magnitude and also in terms of the numbers. I hope the Chinese government's protestation and condemnation will make the U.S. side aware of the need to really cool down such provocations. measures.
Yeah, Aina, put it into further perspective. Exactly how intense, how frequent have these so-called freedom of navigation actions have become under President Trump? For instance, since January of this year, we've seen several times U.S. warships entering waters. But to cross into the 12 nautical miles line, how many times have we seen, and what are the differences?
Well, crossing the 12-mile line it's an interesting imaginary line from this particular point of view. The U.S. is talking about the United Nations Convention of Laws of the Seas, all right? And this was all started by the U.S. because the U.S. decided to make, in essence, a grab for more control of the seas many years ago, 50, 60 years ago. Now, the irony here is that the U.S. is not a signatory to this convention, yet it is insisting, that is the international policeman, on protecting this. So going within that 12-mile is a violation of a convention that the U.S. has not signed, but which they say they can protect. So the ironies of this kind of action just go on and on.
But these most recent intrusions, are they an individual instance, or?
No, these are chips. These are chips that Donald Trump is playing. He's shown quite clearly, you know, with Taiwan, with his posture on China and Russia being these equal nuclear threats, strategic competitors. He's looking for a trade deal. He's trying to appeal to his base by backing China, Europe, South America, Africa, Russia, Iran, the rest of the Middle East. He wants to back everybody down, including close allies like South Korea and Japan. So these are just chips in what he sees as a grand game.
Well, actually, the United States has been trying to contain China in terms of the South China Sea issue, but on the other hand, it also needs, and I think the Trump administration, many people in the United States understands that they need China's cooperation and help in solving probably the DPRK nuclear issue. And the Chief of Naval Operation, Admiral John Richardson, said last year that we'll do our best to maintain our balance here, meaning contain China in the South China Sea and you know, using this as a diplomatic chip. However, now that these ships go into the Xisha Islands, does it mean that there is a shift in the U.S. attitude here, that they don't care about what China thinks of the United States in the South China Sea issue?
And I think this is exactly a fundamental problem from the United States government and President Donald Trump. They want to have the cake and eat it at the same time. And at the time when they really cannot operate without major Chinese cooperation on the DPRK nuclear denuclearization issue, for example, and on many other major international issues, they keep provoking China. They keep violating China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And they keep sending these confusing messages.
Right.
So I think it does not reflect well on the international position
of the
United States.
What are we supposed to make of it at this moment? Does the U.S. want China to help coordinate and help solve the DPRK nuclear issue, or not really, as was seen by the intrusion?
No, I mean, what U.S. is trying to do is goad China into doing something militarily, to respond with some sort of action where the U.S. can paint China as the aggressor, as the one who's being forward. I mean, the typical Trump playbook is to do something aggressive and then blame your opponent and saying that they're the ones who are making you do this. You've seen this with Iran. He was doing it earlier with the DPRK. He's done this with everybody, including Europe and, as I said, his other allies. So this is part of it. I think the more serious part of this is what happened just last week when they decided that they were going to disinvite China from these. This was a long-planned issue that was about military.
Yeah, what's behind it?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump is trying to push his trade deal. He's trying to look strong. He looked weak when he decided he was going to throw out all these tariffs at China, hoping that China would fall to its knees and just, you know, say, whatever you want, Donald will do. It wasn't practical. And for the same reasons that he cannot impose these kind of arbitrary $200 billion reductions and things, is the same reason he can't have a naval blockade of the East.
Right. Victor, what are the potential consequences, though, of this kind of decreasing trust between the two sides and decreasing level of interaction between the two sides, especially in the military sense?
I think this is very dangerous. This may actually push the China-U.S. relations over into abyss, for example. And trust is very important between China and the United States, especially between the two military. And I think the constant violation of the Chinese sovereignty and territorial integrity, incursion into the 12-mile zone, for example, really sends very dangerous signals. It may actually breed a miscalculation or misjudgment, either by the U.S. military or by the Chinese military. What if, for example, a missile is fired and one ship is sunk, for example?
And right now there is no hotline.
And casualties are created, for example. What if, for example, the Chinese military is forced into a corner and then send its own nuclear submarine off to the coast of California or Virginia, for example? Then that will create a panic in the United States. And then the Chinese side can also claim freedom of navigation and move their ships along the western or eastern coast of the United States. I think such calculation by the U.S. and the U.S. military and the U.S. government is really very, very farcical. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't achieve anything good for the United States. It poisons the atmosphere of the relations between China and the United States.
But they're saying, look, China is landing bombers on some of these disputed islands. China is continuing to militarize.
Okay, this is the old chestnut, but the fact is that the U.S. is being very aggressive towards China. I mean, when you put out your strategic defense statement and you say that China is a competitive threat to your nation, on the same level as Russia, which has, 10, 15 times the nuclear capabilities of China, you've made a very aggressive statement. The old adage is, treat China as a friend and it will be friendly. Treat China as an enemy and it will be self-fulfilling. And this is true of almost all nations.
Don't make an enemy out of an enemy.
Yes.
Many thanks to my two guests, Victor Gao, Vice President of the Center for China and Globalization, and Einar Tangen, author, columnist, and commentator. And here is my point, my personal commentary. Following the freedom of navigation story, I think has to be understood that China's response has been rather measured. Basically, if the U.S. disinvites China to some kind of military exercises, I don't think it is something that China would be angry about or would get extremely frustrated over. Again, this is the decision of the U.S. If they want to see China as a rival and decide not to engage China in these exercises, then let it be so. China understands that in the overall interaction between China and the U.S., some aspects are more important than others, and in this case, the overall positive development of bilateral economic relationship and the security situation on the Korean Peninsula outweighs the differences the two sides have on the South China Sea issue for the time being. Hopefully, this will be something that is shared by President Trump in order for the situation not to escalate. That is it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.